The Horror Story. I was 11 when I first discovered the world of horror games, tucked away behind the glow of my computer screen in my oversized bedroom. My parents thought I was just playing harmless, cheerful adventures, so I made sure to keep it that way. After all, they'd never understand the allure of the dark, the thrill that comes with every eerie creak and distant whisper. My room was my sanctuary, the place where monsters stayed on the other side of the screen, or so I thought. It began innocently enough, with games like Spooky's House of Jump Scares and Five Nights at Freddy's. Their pixelated terrors weren't enough to faze me, and I quickly craved more. Something darker. Something deeper. Late into the night, long after the rest of the house was asleep, I'd crawl into my chair, shut the door, and dive into new realms of horror. I loved the thrill of it all, the adrenaline, the heart-pounding tension. But as I moved on to more intense games, those that felt too real, the line between virtual fear and reality started to blur. There was this one game I found on a sketchy forum, something that shouldn't have existed. It didn't have a proper title, just a string of gibberish symbols. My antivirus tried to stop me from downloading it, warned me with every pop-up window, but curiosity got the better of me. The moment the download finished, my room seemed different. The air felt thicker, colder. I shook it off, attributing the sensation to my imagination. The game loaded, and the screen turned black for a long, unsettling moment before an image flickered to life. It was a room. Not just any room, though. My room. Every detail, down to the posters on my walls, the chair at my desk, even the small crack in the corner where I had once dropped a heavy book. My stomach twisted, but I couldn't stop. The figure in the game, a shadowy version of myself, sat at the very same desk, facing the screen just like I was. I moved the character forward, out of the chair, and watched as he navigated the space. Every time I turned him to look out a window, I'd glance at my own, half expecting something to be staring back. The digital version of my room was unsettlingly identical, yet off. Shadows pooled unnaturally in the corners, and the light from the monitor didn't seem to push them back as it should. I moved the character to the bed and clicked on it. Suddenly the game glitched. The screen flickered violently, static screeching from my speakers. Then it stopped. The game returned to normal, or at least what passed for normal, and there was something standing behind my character. Just barely in view. A tall, featureless figure, draped in darkness. I froze. A soft scratching sound came from somewhere in my room, real this time. It was faint, but it was there. I whipped around, expecting to see nothing but the familiar comfort of my cluttered space, but nothing felt familiar anymore. Every shadow seemed to watch me, the corners of the room deeper, darker. The scratching came again, this time louder. Closer. I turned back to the screen, my heart pounding. The figure was gone, but a message had appeared, flickering in pixelated red text at the top of the screen. I see you. I slammed the escape key. Nothing happened. Alt plus F4? No response. The game wouldn't let me leave, trapping me there with that figure, with the shadows that seemed far too alive. My breath hitched as the scratching sound grew, turning into slow, deliberate footsteps. The game's character, my digital doppelganger, turned on his own, facing the door to the virtual room. The footsteps, both in the game and in real life, grew louder, heavier. They were coming from the hallway. I shot a glance at my door, half expecting to see it swing open. But it didn't. The footsteps stopped. Silence pressed in from every side. Then, in the game, the door creaked open on its own. The room on screen was now plunged into darkness, save for the faint glow of the computer screen, just like mine. A figure, shrouded in black, moved toward the character. The screen flickered, and the game's character turned to face me. No, not just the character, the thing that stood in his place. Its hollow eyes stared directly into mine, as if it were truly aware of me sitting there, watching. My hand trembled as I tried once again to close the game, but the controls were dead. "It's in your room," the text on the screen read, and I swear I felt the breath of those words on the back of my neck. I didn't dare turn around. I couldn't. That's when the power went out. The room plunged into pitch blackness, the only sound being my ragged breathing and something else. Something slithering from the corners. Something real. I sat there, paralyzed in the darkness. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, trembling as if they could somehow will the game to shut down on their own. But the screen was dead, and the soft hum of the computer was gone. No whirring fans, no hard drive spinning, just silence. Except for that sound. A faint slithering. It was soft at first, like something dragging itself across the floor. I thought maybe it was just the cooling pipes in the walls or the house settling for the night. But it was too deliberate. Alive. I clenched my eyes shut, my mind racing. I should have never downloaded that damn game. I should have listened to the warnings, to that gut feeling that told me something wasn't right from the start. But it was too late now. Something was in the room with me. I forced myself to open my eyes. The dark pressed in around me so thick I couldn't make out the walls. My computer screen was just a black mirror now, reflecting the faintest sliver of moonlight that slipped through the curtains. I squinted, trying to convince myself there was nothing there, that it was all in my head. But the slithering grew louder and closer. I needed to move. My hand slowly reached for the desk lamp, my fingertips brushing against the cold metal base. I flipped the switch, desperate for light, for anything to push back the shadows that seemed to creep toward me. Nothing. The lamp was dead. My heart thudded in my chest, loud enough that it almost drowned out the slithering. Almost. I stood up from my chair, my knees buckling as I stumbled back toward my bed. It felt safer there somehow, like I could throw the blanket over my head and pretend none of this was happening. But the moment I moved, the noise stopped. My breath caught in my throat. It was listening. Watching. The silence stretched out for what felt like an eternity, the darkness so thick it felt like I could reach out and touch it. Then I heard it again. Tap, tap, tap. It wasn't slithering anymore. Now it sounded like nails, long jagged nails, tapping lightly against the hardwood floor. The sound moved from one corner of the room to another, circling me, testing me. I swallowed hard, my throat dry, my hands shaking uncontrollably. I wanted to scream for my parents, but the fear clamped my throat shut. They wouldn't believe me anyway. They'd come in, flip on the lights, and everything would be fine. No monsters, no tapping, no shadows shifting in the dark. I would just be that scared little boy who cried wolf. Again. But I knew better. This wasn't just in the game anymore. The tapping stopped, replaced by a soft, raspy breathing. My skin crawled as I realized it was coming from directly behind me. The room felt impossibly small, the walls closing in as that sound, too human to be a creature, yet too monstrous to be human, grew louder. I couldn't bring myself to turn around, every instinct screaming at me to stay still, to not acknowledge whatever was lurking in the shadows. Then the breathing stopped. I held my breath, waiting. The silence was deafening, every second stretching into what felt like hours. And then, from the darkness, a voice, a cold, low whisper, so close to my ear that I could feel its breath brushing against my skin. You shouldn't have played the game. Every hair on my body stood on end. My legs buckled, and I collapsed onto the bed, curling into myself like a child. I could feel something hovering just behind me, its presence pressing down, suffocating me. I was too afraid to open my eyes, too afraid to move, to breathe. The whispers continued, soft and relentless, words I couldn't make out but that echoed in my mind like a twisted lullaby. I felt the mattress shift, just slightly, as if something had crawled onto the bed with me. My heart raced, pounding so hard I thought it might explode. It's your turn now. The whisper came again, more distinct, closer. My mind screamed at me to run, to fight, to do anything, but my body was frozen in place. I felt a cold pressure against my leg, fingers, icy and bony, creeping along my skin, wrapping around my ankle. And then, with a violent tug, it yanked me off the bed. I hit the floor hard, gasping as the wind was knocked from my lungs. My fingers clawed at the floor, desperate for something to hold onto, but the room was spinning, the darkness swallowing me whole. I kicked out wildly, my foot connecting with something solid, but it didn't make a difference. It was dragging me. Away from the bed. Away from the faint moonlight. Deeper into the dark. The whispers grew louder, filling my head, drilling into my skull. You let me in. You let me in. You let me in. They repeated over and over, a twisted chant like a mantra. I was almost at the door when it let go. The whispers stopped. The room was suddenly silent again, save for my own panicked breaths. My body ached from the fall, my head spinning as I pulled myself up to my knees, trembling. I didn't dare look back. I knew it was still there, waiting, watching. The door to my room creaked open slowly, the hallway beyond dark and impossibly long. I scrambled to my feet, my only thought to get out, to run. I bolted for the door, but just as I reached the threshold, something cold and sharp brushed against the back of my neck. You can't leave now. The voice whispered, and I realized with a sinking dread that I had never left the game.